I say hello, everybody. I can't see anyone but Sondra, but that's okay. Sorry. Welcome to tonight's meeting. Really glad to say thank you for coming. We really do need to keep plugging into each other at the moment, Sondra. I think the world is going faster around and around on its axis, and we're trying to keep up with a few things that are going on so we can stay a bit in the moment. And so we're very, very grateful that you take time to speak to us from Eretz Israel and to give us much more, well, I guess to me anyway, personally, trustworthy reporting. There is every other thing out there. So welcome, and please, everybody just sit back and relax and enjoy our good friend Sondra tonight. Thanks, Sondra.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. We have a nice group today. I had to say this, but my original plan was, if you remember the last time we met, I did, it was in November, and it was just after the elections. And this was the 5th election in 3.5 years. And we were very excited because not only was it clear that we were going to have a right-wing government, but it was also clear that we would be able to have a stable government. We had a clear majority and hopefully bring an end to the up and down and instability and so many temporary governments and whatever that we have experienced in these past few years. I was sure that by today we would have a government, and that I would be able to come before you and say, this is the new government of Israel. But unfortunately, that has not happened. I have to tell you, I had a very funny incident. Last night, I'm in Eilat now, enjoying the sun. I'm actually on a holiday this week, but was not going to miss this opportunity to meet everybody. So I'm just taking a break from the sun to meet all of you. But anyway, so last night we were walking along, the sea there, and, there's shops and people and, very, very busy and fun. And there's this real tall guy, and he walks by and he sees us. It's myself, my husband, and my sister and her husband. We're clearly religious Zionist people by the way we look, hair covering, modest dress. The men have a kippah on their heads. So he yells out to us, "We're going to have a right-wing government." So I look at him and I said, "But we're still waiting for Netanyahu to announce his government. What's going on?" And I didn't know who this guy was. And he says, no, don't worry. He's going to announce it very soon. And he walks off, and he's with a bunch of people. One of the guys came up to me and said, "That's the mayor of Lod." Okay. So it was really funny. I mean, he was walking around like, kind of saying, "Yeah," in the middle of nowhere. He didn't have he wasn't in the middle of a political rally. He was just walking down the boardwalk. So it was really pretty funny. But that really, on the one hand, there's a tremendous amount of joy. And he reflected that, he's clearly a political person. He's a Likud fellow. And clearly, very politically involved. But one of the, what I want to do today is, even though we don't yet have officially a government, we certainly have just about all of it worked out. And so with as much as I can summarize for you today, I will, and try to put a little order. But before I get started, I want to point out to you that Shmuel Younger has joined us today. I don't know who you see. If you say something, they'll definitely see you.
Shalom, everyone. Shalom.
Great. So Shmuel is going to, as we met those of you who got on earlier, Shmuel is planning a trip to Australia in February. He's going to be there from the 20th of February through the 2nd of March. And we're right now finalizing the details on that. Shmuel will say a few words as well. And in fact, I'm going to invite you, Shmuel, to please interrupt me at any point, because I'm going to give you a summary of the politics. But, there's an old saying that says, if you ask two Jews anything, you will get three different opinions. So I'm going to be put forward things as I see it, but Shmuel may see things a little bit differently. So Shmuel, you interrupt me at any point and put in your insights, and we'll take it from there. And by the way, I'll repeat this again later. Go ahead, Shmuel.
I just want to say, I give you a news. I don't know if you heard, but just literally 5 minutes ago, Yariv Levin was announced as the new Yoshev Rosh HaKnesset.
Yes, I got it. I saw it. You see, because I checked my newsfeed just before I got
just
on.
Now.
Yes,
just
we're
now.
going to talk about, but he's temporary. He's temporary. Anyway, okay, but Shmuel, if any of you, by the way, particularly in Queensland, we may also have, I think we have also an empty spot in New South Wales, but if there are one here who would like to host Shmuel, who have interest, then please let us know. That would be great. Or let Marion know, or let Joy know, who couldn't participate with us today, but she's our official representative. Anyway, so on to the Knesset. What's going on? So as we discussed last time, Netanyahu ended up coming in with the largest party, but he has a total of 64 members of Knesset from a number of parties who support him as prime minister. 120 members of the Knesset, so therefore anything from 61 and above means you can form a government. Once he has 64, he's in a better position, because when you only have 61, any one person can really hold you by the jugular, and suddenly have something they don't like, and then they can threaten to bring down the government. When you have 64, it's a little more stable. And there, we all believe that this coalition process was going to be simple. But a number of things have happened. First of all, there's been a lot of negotiation back and forth. Most of the agreements have been more or less finalized. We have a fairly clear picture. There still are some things that are not clear. One of the things that's not clear, the first thing Netanyahu did was to negotiate with the other parties that will make up the coalition. And a central part of that negotiation is to determine how many ministers each of these parties will receive and who will be minister of which portfolio. Unfortunately, there will be way too many ministers. What has happened is, when you have smaller parties, these parties want to be sure that they have a large number of ministers in the government, so they have the ability to really influence what's going on. But once you give a party of, 6 seats, if you give them 3 ministers or 4 ministers, then you have to have a similar ratio of ministers in a party with 35 seats. So it's insane, okay? What will actually happen then, we don't really know, because it's only now that Netanyahu is starting to figure out who from his own party, from the Likud, will have which portfolio. And it's not just ministerial portfolios. There's also key chairmanships of committees in the Knesset that are handed out, some of which are very powerful and influential. All this is in the mix. Now, one of the things that I was hoping before going into all of this was that, at the very least, if we had a more stable government, at the same time, we would have a lot, as much as, I had mixed feelings about the last government. Was not a right-wing government, but there were right-wing elements in it, and there were definitely things I didn't like. But one of the things I really disliked was the way the opposition, which is now going to be the government, how they spoke. And I agreed with some of the things they said in criticism, but their criticism was very exaggerated and included things that were not really accurate, very populist, okay? And the government itself, the last government, was very, insistent, came forward as being, we are very dignified. We would never behave like this. If we have criticism of the government, we will usher that criticism, but we will do it in a calm and nuanced way. And we will support anything that a government does that we support. We will only be against the things that we are actually against. Well, now the tables have turned, and Netanyahu was about to put forward a government, and all kinds of rumors and details and things have been leaked now to the press about the content of these various coalition agreements. And what do you know? We suddenly find the new opposition being just as nasty, just as exaggerating as the last government. So I sit here and I hold my head and I said, where is the decency? Where is just a normal conversation? And I really hope that we will get to that conversation. One of the things, though, that's very interesting, if I look at this whole political scene, one of the things that characterized the right when they were in opposition, it was that it was an extremely unified opposition. There were a few parties, but they were supremely coordinated. And really, there was no infighting within the opposition. Now, I'm sure there was infighting, but it was kept out of the press. This was done behind closed rooms. I'm sure there were negotiations and discussions. How do we approach this or that particular political strategy? What are we going to do? They discussed it, but they came across to the people as a very unified opposition. What we're seeing in this new opposition now is already a splintering of the opposition. Now, Lapid, who is head of the largest party in the opposition, a left-center sort of party, has come out with caustic comments. And at the same time, just yesterday, Gantz, who is head of the second largest opposition party, and he's seen as more center. He's not just he's center. He's got some right-wing people in his party. He has some left-wing people in his party. He's a bit of a motley crew there in that party. He is actually now criticizing Lapid. He's saying, you can't just yell from the rooftops and protest on the bridges. You have to be a little bit more nuanced. And so I'm sitting back here as someone on the right, and I'm seeing that public fighting between the two, and that encourages me on the one hand, because an opposition that is not unified is not going to be at all effective. But at the same time, the whole situation saddens me, because it doesn't matter to me if you're on the right or on the left. We can voice our criticisms and our opinions in a dignified way, and we can take on the issues. There are enough issues where we disagree that can be debated. We don't have to, go to extremes and whatever. So what am I actually talking about? Let me give you some examples. Okay, so first of all, I have to say, I'm going to start with something very, very positive. I have to say that I am very pleased with the way the party that is called Religious Zionism. The Religious Zionism party is actually two different parties that came together as what we call a technical bloc to run together in the elections to ensure that they would pass, each party would pass the threshold. Well, they way past the threshold. The threshold is 4 seats per party. They ended up with 14 total seats. So that's equivalent of 7 seats per party. So once they got in, they went back to their separate parties. So the Religious Zionism party is headed up by Smotrich, and the Otzma Yehudit Jewish Power Party, I think that's what it's called in English, is headed up by Ben Gvir. Now, there's similarities between these two parties because they're both right-wing. And they both very much stand for religious values. Ben Gvir seems to be a little more extreme in in the way he presents himself and some of his ideologies. He comes from a very extreme background, but has moderated himself a bit in more recent years. But he is less involved in the religious issues, much more, even though he's a religious person, he is much more involved in national issues. He's particularly involved, for example, in issues of law and order. And his party gained a lot of votes from very secular people because of his stand on law and order. We have gotten to situations both in Judea and Samaria and in the Negev and the Galilee, where we have literally mostly Arab hoodlism and violence and just ignoring the law, and you have violence, you have all kinds of things. Police being afraid to go into these places. And it's very possible because they don't have enough manpower. So Ben Gvir is putting forth this idea: we need more manpower of the police. We We need more authority in the hands of the police so they can actually do an effective job. He therefore given the Minister of Police, well, it's more than police, but the main responsibility is for the police. And he also was able to move some of the authorities that are usually in other ministries into that ministry, law and order. So there's a lot of people that are very, very happy with that. People that you would say would be supporters of any of the right-wing parties, let alone this party, Ben-Gvir's party, are still saying, I hope he succeeds, because the issue of law and order is an issue that is widely understood as being a very important and crisis issue right now. Okay, so that's him. Now, Smotrich, his partner, okay, in charge of the Religious Zionism Party, that's a party that not only deals with right wing, their biggest issues are religious issues and particularly the settlement movement. That is their most important issue. And I am very pleased at the way he handled these negotiations. He was tough. In fact, there was a radio commentator that mentioned the other day, and I think this is very, very telling. He said, one of the reasons that this guy has taken so long to put together, even though at the outset, people assumed that it was a very homogeneous government. They're all right wing. They all agree on all the main things. So what is it taking so long? And one of the reasons is because people like Smotrich were insistent on putting a lot of responsible for this. You will have this portfolio. Not only that the guidelines of the government will include A, B, C, and D, and in the case of Smotrich, we want to be sure that we're going to legalize all those young communities that have legalization has been withheld from them for years. Okay, there are like 20 communities like this that because they're not official, even though they exist and people live there, and many of you have visited in some of these places with me, because they're not legal, they don't get proper electricity, they don't get proper water. It's a mess. There's a lot of issues there. And so it wasn't enough for Smotrich to say, a promise in the coalition agreement, we're going to have that done. Smotrich insisted that he get authority over that issue. And therefore, they move things around. So even though that issue was usually in the Ministry of Defense portfolio, they pulled all the civilian issues having to do with Judea and Samaria out of the defense portfolio and put it into the portfolio that Smotrich is going to be in charge of, which is loosely, I don't know, settlement, and I don't know exactly what they're calling it, but it's becoming his responsibility. And this radio commentator said, you see, it's because none of them trust Netanyahu. And that's exactly the case. I mean, they all think Netanyahu is brilliant. They think he's an outstanding politician. They think he's a very good and important leader of the right wing. But we have all been so badly burned by him, by all his promises in the past. And so what Smotrich did, he says, this is going to be signed in, sealed, delivered in such a way that Smotrich is saying, I will be the one to be responsible for this. Let's hope it succeeds, because if indeed it goes through as it looks today, we will have these younger communities legalized in a very short time, which will make a huge difference to these people. Another change that's happening, the civil administration. The civil administration is also part of the Ministry of Defense. It's an arm of the military establishment. And this is as a result of the fact that Israel has never formally annexed or extended sovereignty to Judea and Samaria. And therefore, formally, Judea and Samaria remains under military rule. Now, the civil administration was established in 1967, right after the Six-Day War, to take care of the civilian issues of the occupied population, the Arabs of Judea and Samaria. But once Jews began to live in Judea and Samaria, we created a hybrid situation, where on the one hand, we're all Israeli citizens. Most laws in Israel are applied to the situation in the communities in Judea and Samaria, but there are many other things that are under the jurisdiction of the same civil administration. And these people are not, first of all, they're not qualified to decide how many houses should be built, where they should be built, do you have enough sewage, do you have enough water? I mean, purely civilian issues. One of the biggest complaints, though, about the civil administration that we've been dealing with in recent years is illegal Arab construction and building in Area C. Area C is the part of Judea and Samaria that's in exclusive Israeli control. And yet the Palestinian Authority have a plan that they put together years ago to build purposely in Area C. Now, they can build freely in areas A and B. That is their jurisdiction. They can give building permits as much as they want, construct roads, do whatever they want on a civilian level in areas A and B. But they're not doing it there. They're doing it in Area C because their goal is to prevent the expansion of the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria and force the continued transfer of land from Area C to the Arabs. And unfortunately, the government of Israel, including the previous governments of Netanyahu, have done nothing to stop that. And so now we're hopeful that now that the civil administration is going to be coming under the authority of Smotrich, that we will see much more success in that. We will have many more personnel working in the civil administration, and they will be able to stop all this illegal construction and at the same time enable further expansion of the communities. So you may say that I'm too optimistic, but that is one thing where I am actually optimistic, and I really hope I will not be disappointed. So what's the problem? Why is the left so upset? And not just the left, there are a lot of people that are concerned, and this is mostly centered around religious issues. What this coalition government has given is a somewhat disproportionate authority to the ultra-Orthodox parties who do not share a more liberal look at the world the way the Likud does, the way much of the religious Zionist party does, and the Ben Gvir party. For example, you may be aware that ultra-Orthodox Jews, for the most part, do not want to give their children any kind of a secular education. The girls have a better education, but the boys study Bible and Talmud. They do not study any math or English or sciences or anything like that. And this is, I think, a terrible thing. And it's something that has been allowed by governments all these years because of their political clout. And there was actually progress in the direction of getting them to include some of these very critical subjects in their curriculums. But this is something that when Netanyahu was trying to gain their support before their elections, he promised them that he wasn't going to move in that direction at all. There were a few other things that were done as well. And these are the things that the left now is using to some extent, playing on very real fears and concerns that most people in the Jewish population in Israel are wondering about, but they're exaggerating it. So, for example, they're saying that as part of this coalition agreement, Israel is going to turn into a government governed not by democracy, but by backward Jewish law. Okay, so first of all, Jewish law isn't backward. But second of all, nobody wants to impose Jewish law on people who don't voluntarily put themselves under Jewish law. Okay, what we do want is to have a certain basic kind of value system that our children are exposed to in schools. We are not interested in progressive agendas, the extreme progressive agendas that are coming in from the West. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about because you're all dealing with the very same issues in your own countries. We're in favor of a liberal agenda. If you want to be religious, you can be religious. You don't want to be religious, you don't have to be religious. Everybody needs to be free. But what's happening is some very unfortunate agreements and statements by people in the ultra-Orthodox world fed the left, and now they're coming out with these crazy statements, and in fact, just I think it was last week, Netanyahu in English put out a statement to the American media where he basically said, don't worry, we are not turning into an Iran or a Taliban. We are going to continue to be a liberal democracy. Another issue has been the courts. I think I mentioned this last time we talked. The Supreme Court of Israel has had unusual jurisdiction that was actually seized by the Supreme Court to overturn legislation. And this has gotten to a crazy thing where there are real problems in the country. For example, immigration. And the Knesset has passed by solid majorities immigration laws that have enjoyed a very broad support in the Knesset that enables us to limit immigration. And every single time those laws are passed by the Knesset, the Supreme Court knocks it down because it says it does not adequately provide for the civil rights of these illegal immigrants. Now, this is a very left-wing court, and these are the kinds of issues that are, if you ask me, I'm very in favor of this kind of judicial reform. But just because we're in favor of judicial reform, what we really want to do is restore a healthy balance between the Supreme Court and the Knesset. But we're not trying to get rid of the Supreme Court. The left, when they're discussing what it is that Likud and the others want to do in the judicial process, they go out and say, oh, we're destroying the legal system, which is just not true. So these just, if you're reading some of the newspapers and seeing some of the issues, this is where we are coming from. And then finally, I just want to address what Shmuel just said. Yariv Levin, who is a very major player in the Likud party, is considered one of the closest ministers to Netanyahu. He was just elected as chairman of the Speaker of the Knesset, or chairman of the Knesset. It's considered a temporary appointment. Part of the argument that's going on now in the different within the Likud is who should be the chairman, and they need very much to pass legislation in order to swear in the government, because they need to change certain things to enable them to do these moving around within the ministries. And in order to pass this legislation, the chairman of the Knesset needs to be from the coalition. So that's why they move forward. Now, Yariv Levin himself is he's a lawyer, a brilliant lawyer, and one of the biggest advocates for judicial reform. And so we need to keep our eyes on him and see what he's going to end up accomplishing. He is supposed to become the Minister of Justice and will be the one really in charge ultimately of judicial reform. So that's basically what I have to say about the political situation. Shmuel, maybe you want to add some comments. You've been so quiet, but I know there's things you're going to want to say about all of this.
I want to say something about it, but I want to transition into something that's related to the days that are coming to us. So everything Sondra said, very, very correct. But I think she's undermining one of the biggest things that happens on the streets now. And when you said it, it sounds nice. There are some concerns. People are afraid. In Tel Aviv, people are afraid that the religious party are basically make this country Iran. I mean, religious laws that, where was it? That I saw somebody wrote that there's going to be an obligation to sell only kosher food in Israel. I'm talking about the fear of them. And they are over the top with concepts and ideas of where we can take these religious laws into just basically changing Israel, the way Israel looks today. You've been to Israel, or if you haven't been to Israel, we are a modern country. At the end of the day, the religious parties here and the religious people are a minority. Indeed, we have a lot of people that are traditional, in the sense that I would say even more than half, they care about Judaism. They care about the basics of the holidays and the Sabbath and some of the Jewish rituals. But, anyway you're going to look at it, in the end of the day, this is not a religious country. Now, when we come into power and there's going to be a majority of religious people, actually, there are going to be 50 people in the Knesset that wear one of these kippot. It is a huge number. It indeed reflects a lot of the movement that happens in Israel. So they're scared and they go against and they say it's crazy and a lot of crazy things that we hear from them. So I want to address this in a context of Hanukkah. And this coming Sunday is going to be December 18. By the way, this is my birthday. And this is the day we're going to light the first candle of Hanukkah. By the way, another thing that happens that day, That's the World Cup finals. If you follow, happens the three events at the same time. Actually, the finals and the time of lighting the Chanukiah, the menorah, is the same time. So it's an interesting thing. And when we're talking about Hanukkah, and of course you've been students of Sondra many years, you know the basic story, and you know about the fight of the Maccabees, Greeks, and about the miracle of the oil that was enough for 8 days. That's the kindergarten story we all know and we all grow to love. And that's a great custom. You go, you light candles, you eat some donuts. That's awesome, but it's not enough. Today, I want to share with you something that usually we don't do. We don't go into this topic. I'm actually going to use a small area of the Talmud, of the Babylonian Talmud, that talks about Hanukkah. In the whole books, a big set of hundreds and thousands of pages, there are only 4 or 5 pages that talk about this holiday. And it's in the middle of the story of the Sabbath. When they talk about lighting the candle of the Sabbath, they talk about lighting the candle of Hanukkah. And this is how they talk about the topic. And inside of the text that talks about where to light it, next to your window or next to your door, how long it should light. There's a lot of, of course, everything, the details of how do you need to perform it. Inside the middle of the text, there's a quote that seems to be not connected at all. And funny enough, it's a verse that appears in this week portion. I'll give you the exact spot if you want to check it out. It is in this week portion. It's chapter 37 of Genesis, verse 24. A very random verse. It talks about the unfortunate story of Joseph and his brothers. And the brothers see a pit, and they decide to throw Joseph into the pit. You remember that story, right? This is where the story starts. But the verse says something very interesting. The verse says, "Ve'abor rek en bo mayim," and the pit is empty. There's no water in the pit. You see the weird part? That's where the Talmud asks, if you said the pit is empty, why do you need to write there's no water in it? Of course, if it's empty, that means there's no water in it. And what the Talmud says there, it quotes a rabbi that explains, it's not empty without water. There's no water, but there's going to be inside scorpions and snakes. Now, I know Australia has something with snakes and scorpions, so maybe that's another sign that we need to talk about it. Listen to this. In the middle of the story of Hanukkah in the Talmud, they talk about the pit of Joseph and the fact that the Torah says, the Bible says, it's empty, there's no water in it, and it explains why do you need to write it's empty and there's no water in it, because there were snakes and scorpions. And my question was, why? Why do we need to see this quote in the middle of the story of the laws of Hanukkah? And the truth is, I learned it many years, and it took me many, many years to learn this lesson until somebody randomly, I heard this from him. His name is Rabbi Filber. Just important to mention his name. By the way, his son is one of the biggest people that in the story of Netanyahu's trial. Side story. If you want to Google it, his name is Momo Filber. It's his son. His father, one of the major rabbis of the old generation. And that's the way he explained it. Why do we need to see in the middle of Hanukkah this verse? And he gave 3 answers. 1, edit. Sometimes when the Talmud gives a quote from one rabbi, there's going to give another quote from another rabbi. And this rabbi is mentioned only twice in the Talmud. So, you need to quote somebody, and he gave one verse of something, he just taught us any kind of law. So, you know what? He also said about this pit in the water. Okay, fine. Second is connected to the law. the verse before, the law before the pit, is about how high the Chanukiah could be to be lit. I mean, I used to live in Hong Kong. Are you allowed to light the menorah when you live in the 20th floor of a building, when nobody can see it? And the law means that if it's too high, above 10 meters or so, there's no point to light it on the window. You should light it next to the door because your eye cannot see so far. And what's the connection? Maybe the pit was so deep that when they threw him, they never knew what's down there. And that's another explanation in the connection. He talked about how deep was the pit because they talked about the height of the Chanukiah. But the third one is the deepest one. And I think it's really connected to the story of the politics and Hanukkah. What is the big concern of the people of Tel Aviv? That we are going to make this place a religious place, a place with tradition, a place that is with the laws of Judaism. But what's the other side? The other side is the story that is deep down rooted in the story of Hanukkah. We are living in a cultural war. And the truth is, it happens not only in Israel, anywhere in the world. If you are a man of faith, you are under attack by all the movements of modern and postmodern winds that tells you you are old, you are not relevant, this is fiction, this is not the way to live. Today, you need to be open, you need to accept everything, you need to be progressive. Hanukkah happened the same. When the Greeks came to the Jewish people and told them, we don't want you to die. We're not going to kill you this time. We just want you to replace your culture. Leave your religion in the back. We are today, we are the new movement. We are the postmodern movement, the post-Greek movement. And we are going to teach you the way you should live. And that's the wind of change that is going to take the world. Today, this is us, the Greeks. So you just need to abandon your religion and move forward. Of course, in Hanukkah, we understand the fight on our spirit is really the essential power of what we need to have. And those Maccabees that had to say, no, we will not change our religion, we are not going to change our culture, and we're not going to abandon our faith. What's the connection to the pit? Exactly that. The Talmud teaches us something really deep. If the pit is our nation, it's our tradition, you need to know, when there's no water inside, it's not just going to be empty. You cannot replace the liquid, the water, by something else. You pour some wine inside, you pour some Coca-Cola. No, when there's no water, when there's no tradition, when there's no religion, you know what's going to happen? There's going to have scorpions and snakes. So in the middle of the story of Joseph, and it's exactly the same time, we always read the portion when Hanukkah happens, we have this symbolic reminder in our pit, in our life, if we going to abandon our tradition, our belief, our faith, it's not going to be empty. It's not going to be without anything. There's going to be negative snakes and scorpions. So the holiday of Hanukkah, and I think that's another point, is to light those dark places with all the spirits that are around us and all the movements that try to, change our world, and to go back to the basics, who we are, what's our mission in life, and what do we want the next generation to follow. I think the only thing the religious parties are doing right now, if we're going back to the politics, is to try to bring some normal values into the system and move away the madness of what came inside from the spirit of the West. Gender, equality, and amazing stuff that we need our youngsters to hear. There are some ways that we need to go into our tradition, into the core beliefs, into what really we believe in, and move away all the bad spirits of the snakes and the scorpions. Not the band, because the band is great, the scorpions, but the animal. Happy
That's,
Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah.
that's great, Shmuel. Thank you. And you know what you're telling me now, I just want to conclude, and then of course we'll open it up to question and answers. I want to conclude about, a thought I had 2 weeks ago. I had the privilege of hosting a group of people from Holland. They come every year, except during COVID, etc. And they bring tulip bulbs, tens of thousands of tulip bulbs, and they give them to cities and towns all over Israel. And every year they spend 2 days with me, 1 day in Judea and 1 day in Samaria. And we go to 5 different communities and they give tulip bulbs to each one. So it's always a good excuse for me to also visit the communities. I'm taking these people, but it's a nice, quiet visit with the communities. It's just a few Dutch people that are with us. And I was in the community of Beit Yatir. Beit Yatir is one of the communities the furthest southwest of Judea. It's a bit remote. It's a farming community for the most part, although there are people there that don't farm. They have a dairy farm there that's quite successful, but there are people that go and work in Beersheba or Jerusalem. There are a lot of teachers. And we were there and we were hosted by 2 women who I actually know since, one I've known since I was, 11 or 12, because she's from Cleveland, 2 years older than me. And another was her friend I met when I was 17. Because the first one, Lisa, invited her friend Sandy to come to Cleveland for a weekend. And I had them at our house for lunch on Shabbat, and that's how I met Sandy. And they have both been our representatives and hosts in Beit Yatir. So there we were sitting there, and of course we're all a lot older than we used to be, and we were reminiscing, and we were talking about, the old days when we were in America, and we were so intent on making Aliyah, and how we all got here, and our friends got here, and we settled in different places. I'm in Samaria, they're in Judea, in this wonderful community. And they're really the old timers, and so then they were telling me, I remember Beit Yatir when there were like 25 families there, and now there are 100 families there. And they're telling me how each of them, some of their children have come back to settle in the community. And so they're talking about 3 generations, their grandchildren are there. And I'm thinking back, wow, here we were the age then of their grandchildren today. Okay. And we were friends and we were Zionists and we were going to make Aliyah. And here, not only do we make Aliyah, but we see there that they have succeeded in conveying these same values. Now, these are the values that Shmuel's talking about that we want to make sure to preserve. Love of the land of Israel, love of God, studying the Bible, living a traditional way of life, being committed to traditional values, which of course are exemplified by the Bible. So you go to a place like Beit Yatir, you see that happening. They took me into the daycare center, which we, through your support, were able to help support. It's a new daycare center because they grew out of their old daycare center. And it's just amazing. You see all these little kids. Now, these are the next generation, because everybody my age that started that community, it is our grandchildren that are that age, not children. You see all these little kids. And so it's really, really good. And then, like a few days ago, I read this crazy article. It seems that, I don't know who it is actually, but there are some people who are putting out this message on social media here in Israel. And they're saying, Shmuel was talking about how people are afraid, saying, are you afraid of the crazy religious theocracy that's going to be in Israel? Contact us. We'll show you how to leave Israel and move to Europe. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, what is going on here? Of course, this is a very tiny number of people that would be attracted to this. But when I see this and I balance it against a Beit Yatir, these are people, they're not bad people. They really aren't. They are missing something. And our purpose is to embrace these people with love and show them a beautiful tradition. Because if they're sitting here in Israel in the middle of this amazing miracle and they are afraid and they don't know what they have, they're missing something. And I hope they don't leave and go to Berlin or London or wherever. I hope they stay here. But it is places like Beit Yatir that have provided the model. of the continuity, of the being able, of the connectedness. When we raise our children with traditional values, we have a much greater chance, of course, there's no guarantees, we all know that, but we have a much greater chance of creating a connectedness, not just to tradition, not just to the land, not just to people, but to God, ultimately. And, this is, what I would just say is, I agree with Shmuel 100%. These are our primary values, our struggles today. It is a culture war, but I want to make it very clear, and I'm sure Shmuel agrees with me. We don't see our fellow Jews who disagree with us as people we are doing battle with. We are doing battle against ideas that are dangerous. We believe that people, for the most part, are people that can be swayed in either direction. And our challenge is to embrace these people and bring them back in so that they can themselves also feel very connected to the land of Israel. And I hope that this new government will be wise enough to understand they have to speak a language that will appeal to a broad section of Israel, to put down these fears and at the same time enable them to see and embrace the beauty of Judaism that we are trying to bring to the forefront. Marian.
Hi, Sondra. Thank you. All righty. So anybody who would like to ask a question, put something forward? Sondra, even Shmuel, are you up for Q&A too?
For sure. We're here.
Yeah, good. So I don't know. Do you want to do it through the hand wave thing or just unmute and just pop your hand up and Sondra and Shmuel can see? Anyone with a question? There's probably too many things to ask. You can't even think of one. I think I'll just start by, well, not a real question, but I really do appreciate you bringing that in, Shmuel. We are obviously people of faith, people of the Bible, and you're right, where we are very slowly, increasingly realizing that we are going to be under pressure of our faith situation.
Yes.
And so it's a reality in Israel, as you said, and it's a reality most definitely where I live in Melbourne, and increasingly across other nations. I listened to Dennis Prager today. So he always has his finger on the pulse, and
Yes.
so thank you. We just need to stay together to keep each other encouraged to really be firm on what we understand, that there is one God in heaven, and he has an effect on all of us, and we pray more and more people will come to believe that. So, okay. Any questions coming forward?
Yes. Sondra, Lapid, I'm having a problem in deciding how I should pray for him. I don't want him to go under a bus or get stomped by an elephant, but the disruption that he's bringing into the community there is quite divisive. And how do I pray for this guy?
Well, I think that Lapid, I don't think Lapid is a bad guy per se. That's my opinion.
No.
And I think, in fact, that he has, in certain contexts, he has respect for tradition. But I think what's happened to Lapid, as well as people on both sides of the political divide in Israel, is that to some degree they have let their anger and frustration blind them.
Yes.
And I think at one point, it would be possible to sit down with Lapid before he became so politically powerful. You could have sat down with Lapid and said, look, this is the ultra-Orthodox, these are their concerns. Here is the secular, these are their concerns. Here are the people in the middle, these are their concerns. Here are the people who live in Judea, these are their concerns. Let's talk about it and let's see where we can come to an agreement and where we need to,
Exactly. Israel
but
is more
he's not
important
there anymore. because he's
No.
gone so political. And,
Yes.
and frankly, Netanyahu was the same when he was in the opposition.
Yeah.
And so my sense in terms of prayer is to ask God to remove the anger,
Yes.
remove the anger, and to open
Wisdom.
their ears
Yeah.
and their eyes
Yeah.
to listen to the concerns of the other side.
The division in America is the same as the division in Australia, New Zealand, Israel, England.
The
It's
difference
just
in Israel, I have to say, is that it is a solid majority who are against
very,
these ultra liberal progressive ideas.
yes.
Because I'll tell you the truth, we have now 64 members of Knesset who are with the coalition. But within the opposition, there's probably at least, and I'm being conservative, 15 or 20 people who have the same or similar ideological positions as the right, but because of their hatred for Netanyahu or whatever, hatred for this or that about the ultra-Orthodox, they're not coming together. Yes. Would you agree with that, Shmuel?
Yeah. We need more unity in Israel. Yes.
Definitely. And also, when you look at the numbers, 64 in coalition, and how much are in the Arab parties? We have like 10 of them, which how much is being left? Like 40 something. Inside of them, as you said, at least 7, 8 are religious. Some are settlers. So absolutely.
I would say also something else. As much as we have a huge debate against the Arabs on political issues and on Zionism, when it comes to the religious issues, they are as against the progressive agenda as we are, which is ironic. And there are times when the Orthodox cooperate with the Arabs on these kinds of issues. Because at least on that, they still have their traditional values. Sometimes they're a little crazy. I mean, they believe in killing people that don't agree with them. We don't go like that. But, you know, they also have an interest in a more traditional environment and culture.
Yes. The left wing in Israel is the same as the Democrats in America. They're just getting further and further and further away from common sense, from the unity for love of country, love of their fellows. It just seems, well, it's the same in Australia. Our left wing here is going bonkers, doing stupid stuff, far away from the living God. They really are. Yeah. And that grieves me. It really does. They're just leaving God behind in so many areas.
Oh, I see Lyndall has raised a hand. Lyndall?
Lyndall was just trying to unmute.
Okay.
Thank you, Sondra and Shmuel, both for what you have said tonight. Really appreciate that. Sondra, and both of you or either of you may want to respond to this, but Sondra, you were mentioning that just towards the end of your time talking about people who hold different ideas from what you do, and you see it as part of your role to persuade them, I guess, to dialogue with them. Can you give us an idea of how that may be done formally, more informally? What opportunities are there for those sorts of persuasive discussions to happen?
All right, well, I think Shmuel will have a lot more to contribute on that than I do, but my sense, and this is how I've always felt, that in many ways the political system is destructive of those conversations as opposed to encouraging those conversations. But I have one of the things that I've always enjoyed is the tour groups that would come, Christian tour groups that would come to us. Their tour guides were almost always secular Jews, that if it's Israelis, that if it weren't for the Christian tour group who wanted to come and visit with us, they would not have come in. They don't know anything about Judea and Samaria. And we would always have these conversations, and they would always go away saying, wow, this is neat, you know, because they're tour guides. They are experts in the history and geography of the people of Israel, the land of Israel. They care about it. But for so long, we were demonized through the media. So when they had the opportunity to actually come and see and have a conversation, they realized we're not that far apart. And if at the end of the day, they may be interested in a two-state solution. And this was years ago. They may have been interested in a two-state solution, not because they don't believe Israel belongs to, the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people, but because they said, well, maybe this is the only way to have peace. Today, almost nobody in Israel thinks that way. Even on the left, nobody thinks a two-state solution is going to, or almost nobody believes two-state solution is going to really be a solution because of all the, experiments we did over the years. So there is that kind of conversation. But I know Shmuel, a younger generation, is actually involved much more in that kind of thing. So Shmuel, maybe you can share how you see
it. I don't know if you like my answer. My answer is not so positive. Can you see me? All right, wait just a second.
Yes. Well, yes.
And my answer is not that positive, and I think that's one of the biggest problems we have in Israel. We just had this conversation in the office, me and Sondra. We talked about the fact, and actually I'm going to quote the previous president, Rivlin, who had a long talk about the tribes of Israel. And not the biblical tribes of Israel, but the fact that it's really hard to see that today you come to Israel and you're going to have the seculars of Tel Aviv and the ultra-Orthodox of Jerusalem and the settlers of Judea and Samaria and the people who don't care up the north. And, we are really separated from one another. That doesn't make sense. Now I'll explain why. We are a small country. Most of us have relatives and friends, really strong friends in the other tribe, so-called. And when you look at this and you think about it, and why is it such a separation between us? And I think this is something that is the way to change it is actually going back and thinking about how we are becoming a place that is going to accept the fact that we need to be close and friends and neighbors of people that are different than us. That's a change. That's news. Usually you want to live with people that are, everybody likes you, they dress like you, they think like you. But if we want to make a place here that's going to influence one another, and the truth is, when I'm saying influence one another, I'm basically trying to say, even getting the exposure to the way we live, because they don't know the way we live. If the people of Tel Aviv are going to come visit Karnei Shomron, and they're going to see Sondra and her family, and the neighborhood, and the communities, and the volunteering, and the way people live, they would be amazed. Just like visitors and tourists from all over the world say, wow, what a place. It's a place of justice, if people are kind, loving. This is something that is really the honest truth. But they don't come. They are in Tel Aviv. We are on the mountains. And this separation in the long run is going to damage us. I'm telling you, I'm eager to think and to develop a reason for them to come and visit in our homes. Just like CFOIC has done so nicely and bring Christians to our communities. Sondra, after you're retired, you need to do secular Tel Aviv coming to our communities, because I really feel that's one of the crazy things we don't have. And then after that, people of Tel Aviv, the ultra-Orthodox of Jerusalem should come and visit our communities. And we live in a small country, and yet everybody has his own corner. I think it needs to be different, definitely.
I'll tell you something. I agree with you, Shmuel. And there was a time when I first moved into Judea and Samaria that was actually active in a number of initiatives to do that kind of thing, and discussion groups and all kinds of stuff. And then I didn't have as much time anymore, so I stopped doing it. And these groups continue, but I don't know how effective they are. But I do. There's no question. Once somebody comes and meets us in person, that really helps the issue a great deal. I will say, though, that despite everything you see on the politics, there's a lot more mixing and understanding of one another than there ever was. And I can say that from a perspective of 40 years. This is, there isn't a workplace in Israel that doesn't bring together people from communities in Samaria and Judea, from Jerusalem, from Tel Aviv. And these people are working together and realizing, and I know my husband, for example, is the only religious person and the only settler in his department in a very big company in Israel. And they will often say, oh, no, but you're not really like a settler. And he'll say, oh, but yes, I am. This is who we are, and just his ability to be a computer programmer working in that kind of environment, little by little, the barriers come down.
Yes. Yes.
Any more
Anyway.
questions before we finish the evening, which has been very engaging as always? Yeah, go for it, Shmuel. Off you go. Move into Tel Aviv.
No, we can't move to Tel Aviv.
There's a problem. There's interest here. It's Samaria.
Then come move into Melbourne, Australia. We really need people of your faith. I mean, we've got them.
And
Yeah,
talking about Melbourne, Melbourne, Australia, I want to come back to what Sondra said in the beginning. I am coming, very happy, very excited. The first time me coming as a CFOIC representative to Australia. If you have any thoughts, people that I should meet, churches that I should go, pastors, leaders, or anything you have in mind that can help us in CFOIC, expose our work, do our thing, please, our emails, connect us, let's make it happen. We have amazing volunteers and people that want to help us and support us there. And I need to mention here, just because she's sitting just next to us, Marian, that is doing amazing there. Please think about us and let us try to do something great together.
Amen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Every one of us here tonight, Shmuel, is hoping that more Australians will be exposed to the wonderful people that are those settlers, well, not settlers, the communities of the heartland of Israel. Amongst my own people of faith, there's still people. We keep having the conversation, and for those of us tonight, we thank you very much that you take your time for us. You've got a lot on, as we would say, on your plate. Don't know where it came from. It's very English, I think. But if you will just allow me to read a bit of scripture that I hope will really bring together what Sondra and Shmuel have shared, because they too have the great hope that Shema Israel, the Lord thy God is one, that we completely do not forget who he is. I'm going to read out of Psalm 135, if you just let me do about 7 verses. Praise the Lord and praise the name of the Lord. Give praise, O servants of the Lord, who stand in the house of the Lord, in the courts of the house of our God. Praise the Lord, for the Lord is good. Sing to his name, for it is pleasant. For the Lord has chosen Yaakov for himself, Israel as his own possession. For I know that the Lord is great, and that our Lord is above all gods. Whatever the Lord pleases, he does, in heaven and on earth, in the sea and all deeps. He it is who makes the clouds rise at the end of the earth, who makes lightnings for the rain, and brings forth the wind from his storehouses. And I just thank you, and we fully believe in the people of Israel and the land, and we are so privileged to be able to walk with you through these days and to help in any way that we can to see this wonderful end that the land he has promised Abraham and his descendants, it will come to pass. And for all of us, I talk to my Christian friends here, let's have the same identification as Abraham. The just shall live by faith, righteousness, So do not be swayed, guys. Just trusting that God is who he says and he will do what he said he would. Thank
Amen.
you to everyone coming tonight.
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed that film. And we have lots more film content and emails and articles that I'm sure you will enjoy as well. Check out our website at cfoic.com and subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that right from the homepage. I know you will really enjoy the content that will land in your inbox on a regular basis. Hope to see you soon.